Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me here and to say thank you for your hospitality. It's our first time in Lithuania. Paul, who my husband and operations director at Adrenaline Alley, has made the trip with me. So it's been quite exciting and very creative. I want to start by showing you a little video because a lot of the time when we talk about a skate park, people imagine a little few ramps or a little area in a small place within a town, or in the UK it would be on an estate, sort of in the rural areas as well as the towns. So people have this idea that they are sometimes very antisocial, and the people that sort of do these sports are not always in the right place at the right time doing what they should be. So this is Adrenaline Alley as it is today. And what I'm just going to do is take you through this video to give you an idea, and then I'm going to take you back to the beginning to tell you the story of how it developed, where it came from, what the values and the ethics are behind it, and then obviously you'll have an idea of the facility from watching the video as I tell the story. At the moment, it's still in one building. This is now the second building. Create that building, it actually cost us about £400,000 just to put the wooden ramps in. And this area is a performance area, and this is unique in the UK. So these performance areas that you see the black ramps in actually help the riders to go from beginner to intermediate to advanced to world champions. So we're in building 3 now. This is our new outdoor plaza. The area that you see in the background there is also our land, so we have lots more room to develop in the future. That's where the BMX riders would start on the course for what we call the dirt or the trails park. These are all professional ramps where they're going maybe 12, 15 foot in the air above the ramps. So that's Adrenaline Alley as it is today. Years ago, myself and my son John, we decided that the urban sports needed safe environments, needed a safe place for the young people to do their sport. And the group that we started with basically came up with this vision, mission and our values. And without going word for word through there, it was basically about making sure that we provided that safe place for young people, making sure that we could become a sustainable, at the time, charity, because I didn't understand what a social enterprise was when I started out, and to make sure that, obviously, we're always willing to listen and learn, making sure that we go that extra mile, and making sure that we can adapt the business in whatever shape or form that we needed to as we progressed. So everybody says to me, why you? Why a woman in a man's world? What made you do this? My son John, who's on the right there, he had spent 15 years in hospital with an undiagnosed brain tumour. So he'd had a very hard upbringing in the sense that he was very institutionalised in hospitals. So his social skills and his peer skills were not very good. So we got through his diagnosis, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and by the time he came out of hospital, he was 14 years old. So as a parent, I was, oh my dear, oh my Lord, how am I going to get this child into society? How am I going to get him to be normal? And he was, he wanted to be normal. So basically, what happened was we went home from the hospitals and he met some local lads who were skateboarding just on the street where we lived. And he got to know them, and their attitude was, we don't care that you look like you've got cancer. You're on a board, you're on a skateboard. Doesn't matter if you're good, doesn't matter if you're bad. None of that matters. You're on a board, so it's instant respect. To John, that was massive. It meant that he could go out, he was meeting people, he was getting fitter, he was socialising, and it was just a massive hurdle for him. So he carried on for about 3 or 4 months, and by this time he was learning to play guitar. So he went out to his guitar lesson, and he had a skateboard under his arm and his guitar on his back. And unfortunately, 3 local lads who knew him, knew he had a brain tumour, decided that because he had a skateboard, he would be their target. And they attacked him and beat him up really, really badly. He came home that night and we were absolutely devastated. Because obviously what that did to John in terms of being a person experiencing that after what he'd been through was horrific. So we got through that again, and I sat in the house and I thought, I've just been through one hell for 15 years, I'm not going through another. What can I do for you, John, that can get you back into society? And he said, Mum, it's not just me and the skateboarders I'm with, it's the BMXers, it's the inline sort of rollerbladers, and now scootering. He said they're all targeted because they're driven underground, and they're moved on by the residents, moved on by parents, business. They just have nowhere to go. So I said, well, I've been born and bred in this town, and I didn't know these young people were being subject to these attacks. You know, what can we do? But in the back of my mind, it was always about getting John out. I didn't know a skateboard from an ironing board. I had no idea. Yeah, that's exactly what it was like. I had no idea. When John said to me BMX, I was like, what's a BMX? You know, I learned very quickly. I started my creative shock, without a doubt. And we started by getting the community kids together. It was a nucleus of young people. And we did a community consultation. And very quickly I realised that this is much bigger than I originally thought. But not really understanding it, decided, well, these kids have got a voice, they've got a passion, they're doing sport, they're fit, mentally, physically. So I thought, right, you know, I'll be that person that can help them to have that voice and move it forward. So what we did was we spent a couple of years just trying to get the local community business, the local council, trying to get them on side, and they were just like, no, just go away. This is pie in the sky, as we call it in the UK. This is never going to happen. So I just said, right, if you don't want to help me, just go away, we'll do it without you. It's as simple as that. Because I could see the passion that the kids had to make this happen, and I wanted to get John out. So what we did was we approached, we have a big motor speedway racing circuit just sort of at the back of where we are now, and they were kind of the Wheels venue in Corby. So I approached them and said, look, I've got this project going. What I need to do is I need a place to put these kids so that this becomes a reality. So he gave me some land, gave me a little office, and basically we started trading in July of 2003. After 2 years, we'd had over 13,000 kids, bearing in mind that was very seasonal. So I quickly understood that it wasn't sustainable. And I was very, very lucky at the time that a gentleman called Phil Tulber, who I know a lot of you people here know from being involved for the last 3 years, Phil came over and opened my mind as to what social enterprise was. I was just running a skate park for the kids, but I actually was doing a lot more. I was doing training and learning with the kids. I was doing fundraising. I was doing, just lots and lots of things. All the social objectives, obviously, that came out of working with the young people, as well as the sports and the social element of it. And Phil has mentored me over the past sort of 8 years, and also been a director of the charity, so that the organisation itself, as much as it is a charity, it is a social enterprise. So we've developed all the social objectives, mainly around the subcultural elements of what we do, but also understood more about what the sports create and how they're created from the riders and the people that just come to the venue. So we kind of opened our eyes to all of these objectives here, really, and a lot more. But the overall aim was to try and improve the lives of young people, which we continue to do. So this was just what we had right at the beginning of the organisation. And the reason I wanted to show you that film at the beginning was because we don't have a lot of time to go into it in that much detail, but that's basically where we were and where we are now. And we started sort of putting live bands on, we started including disabled riders, and as I say, we were just basically outdoor. At the end of that, 2 years later, it was obvious that we weren't sustainable, so I went to the owners of Rockingham Speedway and said, I can't do this anymore. This is basically unsustainable. I have to work. I was doing it all voluntary. I wasn't being paid. I was making sure the kids were getting things out of it. But at some point, I had to earn a living and I had to move on myself. So I was very fortunate that the owner of Rockingham Speedway at the time said, when I sell it, the owner will have to look after you. And I was, oh, fantastic. And he did. He gave me a chicken factory, which is what building one was. And it was, as you can see, it was derelict. Loads of things in there. There was lots and lots of partitions in there. There was big spit roast ovens that they used to rotisserie the chickens on. And I thought, oh my word, how do I do this? You know, I didn't really have any experience in business. I was an apprentice hairdresser caring for a sick child for sort of many years. But I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. signed the lease. This was in March of 2006. By July 2006, we were in, we were open, and we were trading to the public. Simply because we just galvanised the community together. If skateboarder boy there had a dad that was a plumber, he was brought in. If he was an electrician, he was brought in. If he was a decorator, we brought him in. And in amongst all of this, the kids were actually organising the business and saying, well, you know, we need to charge this, we need to open at this time, we need to do that. So it was done in consultation with the people that use it at all times. That's what we do as we are now. What we've basically done since then is organically grown. There's been such a demand for the sport that we've basically risen from 13,000 participants outside to 60,000 plus every year and continuing to grow. We have 59,000 individual members on a database. 72% of our participation comes from outside of Corby or Northamptonshire in the region that we stay. And 8% of them are international. So that's 864 national riders on a world-class level that come to our facility. We've held competitions, we've continuously developed and grown. And what we then did in 2009 was recognise that what we had just wasn't enough. We needed to move on. So we managed to secure some funding, and we then developed Building 2 and Building 3. And all of this time, we were getting that free of charge. We weren't paying any rates, we weren't paying any rents. It was actually a development company that allowed us to do that. Unfortunately, 2010, my son passed away. He was working at Adrenaline Alley, he was on the reception, but he became tired of life. So he decided to go to a better place. And that, one, gave me the drive to make sure that his legacy continues, and two, it makes sure that obviously what he left behind continues to change people's lives. Okay? One of the things that he was very passionate about, having experienced the difficulties he did, was to making sure that disabled people, people that were interested in photography, interested in film, actually got to be a part of everyday life at Adrenaline Alley. So what we did was we opened a professional photography studio. We adapted all the ramps for disabled use. We have people, well, we have some young men in wheelchairs that do double backflips over 8-foot, 10-foot ramps. You know, it's absolutely amazing. We have disabled groups that come in, and it's not just about the ramps. They learn life skills. They'll use vending machines. They'll go in the education room. They'll use the photography studio. So it's a whole community that we bring in. We also have music rooms. We have cafe. So we have other ways of generating income as well. It's not all dependent on the actual riding. There's some of our disabled participants, as you see. They're up and down the ramps, and it's brilliant because most people think, how do you incorporate disabled people into extreme sports on a daily level? You do, you just do it. Why not? You know, simple as that. As I said, we have a music room, we have a cafe, we have a study centre, we've got the shop, and really where we are now is that we have been very fortunate in that we secured £1 million and we've just bought all the land and the buildings. So from a social enterprise perspective, again, we now have assets for the future. It's more sustainable. We can continue to grow and develop, one with the money, but obviously with the income. We're £1 million turnover business. If somebody had said to me, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you know, you're going to manage £1 million turnover business and you're going to employ 25 people and you're going to be, you know, the CEO. I haven't worked with kids. Skate park? Who, me? Look at me today. I knew nothing. I was a woman in a man's world. And here I am, standing in front of you in Lithuania. It's unbelievable. You know, that journey I've been on is, it can't be put into words. It's such a learning curve and a learning experience that has given me the passion and the drive. And obviously, to continue John's legacy, is I would just say to anybody in this room today, any budding entrepreneurs, if you have a dream, reach for the stars. Because if you don't get up there straight away, you'll end up pretty much on the next step below to get up there. And that's all I can really say from my experience. That's what you have to do. I'm just looking at just hit 0.
So, Mandy, are you now, like you said in the beginning, you don't know anything. You didn't know anything about skating and things like that. So, would you be able to like be hosting a jury of a competition of skating right now?
Yeah. I mean, we have sort of about 55 volunteers, and a lot of those volunteers come from the industry in terms of being able to provide us with professional judges that want to do competitions, and yeah, we can do it in any of the sports.
That's pretty nice. Yeah. I have a serious question now, so I'm going to pass the microphone over.
Hi Mandy, well done for your fantastic venture. I was curious about the ratio of male-female visitors to your venue.
It's about 70% male, very male-orientated. It has changed slightly because scootering, I'm not sure about in Lithuania, but scootering has become very, very popular. And the BMX skateboarding and inline skating fraternity, if we can call it that, sort of grew up 40, 50 years ago and have been nurtured over the years, and they've got their own particular sort of etiquette and culture, whereas scootering has kind of been dumped on us in the last sort of 5 years. So they're much younger children, and that sport hasn't been nurtured the same way as BMX and skateboard in the old days around, you know, swimming pools and in the backyard sort of thing. So the ratio in women is rising because of that sport coming in. It's much easier. It's not so intimidating. They're not their image, you know, if they fall off a skateboard or a bike, isn't quite as damaged as if they're on a scooter. So yeah, it is rising.
I saw a question somewhere over there. If you could kindly stand and try raising your voice, because it's going to be a little difficult to pass the mic.
Sure, no problem. Really amazing stuff you're doing. I was just wondering about the financial part. Like, you started off as a volunteer, and did you get any donations? How did you move to being a sustainable business? Any more details on that? That's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, as you say, I started as a volunteer. Phil was very instrumental in mentoring me in the art of fundraising and fundwriting in terms of bids. And we did a lot of fundraising, obviously, on our own, but we also had the income that we were generating from people using the park. But generally, to create, obviously, what we have there, I've secured about 5 million in 12 years to do that. I still continue to raise funding, but we are not funding dependent. We are actually sustainable now, and we are putting money. Yeah, it's not an easy thing. It's a very, very difficult thing. And obviously, what we're investing more in now, in terms of having that funding, is succession. I think it's really important that you have to be aware of that. You know, everybody says, "Oh, we'll never have another Mandy. Nobody else will do this." But at some point, somebody's got to, because, you know, I don't want to be running out the way of skateboards when I'm 70. It's hard enough now. So yeah, you know, that's a key part to your sustainability long term. And obviously, having purchased all the land and the buildings, it's my job now to make sure in the next 10, 20 years that everything is in place to make sure that happens. So yeah, in 2009, I think it was, we actually turned it around from being funding dependent to non-funding dependent. So it was 3 years after moving indoor that we were able to do that, which was pretty phenomenal.
Another question over here.
Hello, Mandy.
Hiya.
Once again for the project to see as center presentation. I'd like to ask you a question. You said about how you bought the land in your initial place and so forth. Are there any plans of expanding beyond your current levels?
Oh yes. Oh yes. We never stop. In fact, my board of directors have said, you know, let's have no more development for a year. Please, no more, no more. But my mind, it's just like, oh, it's just constantly going. And the reason that I do that is because the kids that use it, they have ownership of it. They feel, I say kids, you know, people say to me, how many children have you got? And I say, well, I've had one that's passed, I've got a daughter of 17, but actually I've got 30,000 when you walk through that door, because it's boys with toys, mainly, you know. And it is. You know, I've seen grown men on their knees because they've done a backflip that they've been trying to do for 10 years. And I'm sort of, oh, don't cry, I didn't mean to say that, you know. And I'm standing crying with these sort of 30-year-old men that have just jumped off a bike for some reason. But no, what our long-term vision is to replicate. So we want to branch out of where we are and help other communities to develop social enterprises in the way that I've done. And it'll be my job to go into those communities and, you know, get those people out and be able to grow and develop parks that will act as feeders into ours. So we'll become sort of what we call the Wembley of urban sports in the UK, and all the others will just sort of feed in, and there'll be partnerships between them. And yeah, so that's kind of the development. But we've also got we've got 7.5 acres of land at the moment, so I'm quite keen to make sure that that land is used by us. Probably the other quite important thing from being a charitable social enterprise is beneficiary, in terms of, you know, what happens if something does go wrong. So what we've done, although we're on an industrial estate, we've made sure that the land and any development that we do, any assets that we have, are actually given to an organisation called the Northamptonshire Community Foundation. So if anything happens to us, the value of the land and the buildings will go straight back into the hands of the community. It won't belong to anybody else bar the community. The council won't get any of it. It's a completely independent charity. So we've made sure that through our development that, you know, we look after the future as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, any further questions? I can see one hand raised again.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, I know they should. But it's a very interesting question, actually, and not only from a funding point of view, well, the back end of the funding, when you apply for funding, you've got to feed it back. You know, what have you done? What box are you ticking? You know, for how much money you've got. I did all of that at the beginning, and I quickly learnt, once the charity had become sustainable, I learnt to stick to what we do best. Stop trying to tick boxes and stop trying to fit in to make people happy at the facility and through the activities of the facility. So it was about, I mean, the financial climate obviously over the last few years has had a lot to do with that, because, you know, some people think, you know, you're a charity, so therefore we're going to get more than we should, and we're going to do that bit for free. You know, no, we're not doing it for free. No, you're not getting a lot more than you should. Yes, we'll go the extra mile. Yes, we'll make sure that child is safe. We'll make sure that child gets the best experience possible. We'll make sure that they have this or the equipment, whatever. But we're not there to do it for free. We're there to run a business. It doesn't matter if it's a social enterprise, doesn't matter if it's a charity. Ultimately, you're running the business. So obviously that's the first and foremost priority, is to make sure that that works. But in terms of the reaction, I quickly learned as an entrepreneur, don't put the reins on me. You put reins on me, I'm not going to do it. Simply because the minute you get involved with councils and statutory organisations, you start having to tick boxes. You start having to cut the red tape of all the bureaucracy and the difficulties of, you know, especially in extreme sports, because if somebody falls off, what is the risk, the insurance, the liabilities, you know, and you've got 60, 70,000 people a year coming through, that's all got to be covered. But I've just basically said, I'm here. We've got great relationships, but leave me alone. Because I'm going to move, and I'm going to move fast, and you can't keep up with me. So that's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, all time, please round of applause for MANDY. Thank you very